This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Welcome back to the conclusion of my conversation with ChangeMaker Jacqueline Waggoner, the President of Solutions at Enterprise Community Partners. In part one, we talked about Enterprise's new 5-year strategic plan and the initiatives like the Equitable Path Forward. Now, Jacqueline, can you just give us a sense of what an enterprise community looks like, or where you guys are geographically concentrated, and maybe even what's unique about your communities?
Well, Katie, every community is different. We work with thousands of partners across the country through financing homes. We do programs and we advocate for policies that are really designed to serve the people that live in those particular communities. But I would say what's interesting is that, we're coast to coast. We work with partners in all 50 states, but that we have boots on the grounds in a dozen or so communities that are regional reaches, and we've really been able to serve those communities in a really thoughtful way over the years. And the fact that we own and operate our own assets in the Mid-Atlantic, serving 22,000 people, we've put everything we've learned about what makes a great community to work ourselves. And so we are invested in people. So we're about serving our residents, and which has connected us to more resources and programs, and it's really opened the door for our growth and success.
If you had to pick a favorite aspect of enterprise, what would you say that would be? And this may feel like picking a favorite child. So if you're even able to say, is there a favorite aspect that you want to highlight?
Well, you know what? Actually, this is easier than you think, Katie, for me to say. And people, people, people. That's what we're about, inside and outside of enterprise. We're passionate, smart people that work here. We're driven to create change and impact for communities. We're building our legacy as we do this work. Like, we take what we're doing very seriously, and we make sure that we're ground truthing it with the communities. And we do that by listening. When I reflected on Jim and Patty Rouse, they really shaped who we are by starting off by listening to the community. And that has just inspired us to do what we do today. And we're working harder and smarter than ever before.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned in the beginning when we were talking about your strategic plan. And I want to really get into this conversation here because there's so many conversations happening, and not a lot of organizations either know how to go about action steps, but you guys are far surpassing just conversation and action step. You guys have recently announced a 3.5 billion with a B nationwide initiative. I know I have to say billion with
Yeah,
a B
repeat
because
it.
right. But your guys' new initiative is to help dismantle the deeply rooted legacy of racism in housing. And for those of us who have been in housing, we've always known this. And I am shocked, but awkwardly shocked, but still eager to have the conversation because, even as early as last week, I was in a discussion with somebody who had no idea the origins of racism and affordable housing and really how that set into motion so many different things about everything from lease enforcement to design to capital funding, and how that really impacted several different things that happened in that space. But I was having this conversation last week, and somebody didn't even know anything about this, and they were shocked. But it opened up the eyes of awareness, and then they had to go through the normal cycles of grief and just really trying to say, okay, what now? What's the action step? What needs to happen? And Enterprise, you guys are doing an amazing job. And since we have such a wide variety of listeners on our podcast, so I have, anybody who has zero awareness of racism in housing to everybody who's been keenly aware of what has happened. Let's start there and let's see if we can advance some of the details. So what is Enterprise hoping to accomplish with this $3.5 billion initiative?
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate you acknowledging the history of some of the things that have happened that have led to the disparities that we see in housing. We've, I think, as a country, have talked about equity, racial equity, and all of these things, but how do we really factor that into our work? We have started our new strategic plan pre George Floyd, and I'm so excited that, racial equity was one of our top pillars of what we put forward, that we were going to lead with that. And I think people, I call it the post George Floyd era where we are in America, and that it required us to do our work and be more strategic and deliver strategies with some great sense of urgency. And so through that work, I must tell you, we blossom what we call the equitable path forward. I will tell you, as a Black woman, working at Enterprise and having the opportunity to address community needs in a very bold way, to say that we're going to invest $3.5 billion nationwide to help dismantle this legacy of racism in housing is a powerful opportunity for all of us. Because if you could really dismantle the issues for those hardest hit by disparities, you're going to fix it for everyone. And that means that through this work, through the equitable path forward, that means that more homes will get built. And we will be hopefully pushing for, who builds them, who profits from them. We've always focused really on how we can support communities of color, but the equitable path forward, is a $3.5 billion roadmap to making even greater impact and changing that. And so we're doing that through capitals, programs, policy work that we're doing through that effort.
Used to just be there was this awareness of where the communities were built. And so when you look at the metric of not just where they're built or how they're built, but now you guys are layering in who's building them and who's profiting from them, this just really deepens the whole comprehensive continuum of, dismantling the systemic racism of really generations. And you guys are filling in such a gap. And Enterprise is doing it, LISC is doing it, and I like the distinction you made between pre George Floyd and post, because the conversations had such more. There was just more emphasis and there was more urgency, like you mentioned, but because Enterprise and LISC and several others in this space are now adding action, we should really have a better path. And, that's what's so unique about what you guys named it, the equitable path forward. You guys have intention here. This is also part of the why you guys are on the podcast. We call it Change Makers, right?
Yes. Yeah, and you know what, in this particular case, you have to be intentional if you want to see change. I mean, if you sprinkle your strategies, you sprinkle your results, right? And so we wanted to be intentional about our delivery in this program, and we wanted to make sure that we held ourselves accountable, but we also invited other partners. This work includes not only enterprise, but engagement of corporations, nonprofits. It's informed by CDCs on the ground about what they need, not what we think they need, but what they say they need. And when you make big goals and you collaborate with people and you have a vision for the work, then you can say what you've changed. And so you don't change anything you don't measure. And so we're putting our name on this, and that we will execute this and follow it through in collaboration, hopefully with many of the listeners here today.
Speaking of measurement, Enterprise recently released a 2021 playbook that identifies 50 proven, or, probably more than 50 by the time you get through it, of proven evidence-based housing policy recommendations. And you guys name priorities such as strengthening and expanding the low-income housing tax credit and increasing funding for affordable housing and community development programs. A whole list of housing-based recommendations that are evidence-based. This is so much more than just like a feel good story or, yes, we want to change the impact of one person's life, but you guys have really put together the analytics behind this. So, why is this so crucial to provide a policy guidance and even advocacy for this industry?
You've heard me say three things today: communities, people, systems, right? Those things are all interconnected, and our communities across the country are in a crisis that we can't build our way out of it. And so the work that you see outlined and the recommendations you see outlined in our playbook is really acknowledging that half the people in this country can't afford to pay their rent. And then since 2001, rents have risen 13%, while incomes have only rose 5%. And when you think about the economic hardship from COVID-19, 80% of people of risk of eviction are people of color. And COVID-19 has only compounded that. And so, which has harmed, economical and physical health of tens of millions of people. So our collective focus must be about building an equitable recovery from COVID-19. And that includes advancing racial equity, particularly in housing. When you think about the Harris and Biden administration, they clearly called out systemic racism in our country. And that acknowledgement is critical if we are to move forward. And housing policy directly affects people's lives. And so we have the largest affordable housing team in the country, and we will be there advising the Biden and Harris administration every step of the way. When I say that we are the largest agency, we have a federal team and we have policy colleagues across the country advocating for policies that support this effort at the state and local levels. And we plan to work with this new administration that's committed to pledge investing $640 billion over the next 10 years in quality, affordable housing. And so we will be there by their side to help them execute on that.
Well, Quadell definitely applauds you and each of the communities that we work in, every time that we see an infusion of affordable housing, whether that's a voucher, a Section 8 voucher, whether that is, a mobility, initiative, or if it is a reface of an existing community, we have seen such reinvigoration within those communities, but we've also seen that those have been really on a small scale of what the need is. So Enterprise being in this space of making sure that affordable housing is on the agenda, that there is a funding allocation and a real prioritization of this need. We're glad Enterprise is in this space.
Katie, thank you so much. We're happy to be in this space. And given the state of what's happening in the country, it requires bold, big moves to actually address the challenges of people and communities. And we are here to serve, and we're really excited to do it under the frame of making the reality that communities are really and should be stepping stones to more.
Well, Quadell supports you guys, and we are happy to have you guys as allies in this work. And thank you for your time, Jacqueline. And we know that we'll keep seeing great things from Enterprise.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadell.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.